introductions first, dude. So why don't you tell a little bit of yourself to people that are just now watching? Obviously, you have some of your followers coming in and some of mine as well. So some people may know you already, but some of people of mine probably haven't got a chance to know who you are. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I'm actually originally from New Mexico. I grew up there, and I did my bachelor there at UNM. So I
what are
have
you
a
doing in
bachelor.
Canada?
Well, actually, still going to school. So I have a bachelor in exercise science and nutrition. And although I didn't go through with nutrition to be a dietitian, I stuck with exercise science, which is why I'm in Canada now. I live in Montreal, and I'm doing my master's degree here at Concordia University.
Nice.
But yeah, now I'm an online trainer. I transitioned from in person because I don't think I really have the personality for in person. I don't like the boot camps and the counting next to someone. So I'm much better suited for online and just following people through their journey and helping them. So that's what I'm doing.
That's awesome, dude. And I know you and I relate a lot in some of the content that we kind of put out, and as far as nutrition and fitness as well. I know for a fact that you talk about this all the time, that you went, and this is something that I cannot relate because it didn't really kind of happen the same way. But you always talk about you were kind of the fat kid in school, and was this kind of the thing that kind of jump started your sort of your nutrition journey, or this kind of thing, trying to kind of get fit at that moment? Is that what kind of got you to study this, or was it something different?
Yeah, so I was up until I would say, I don't know, maybe 14, 15, say 14. I was, a fat kid, but it was more when I was really young. So it was 8, 9, 10, maybe up until 12. I was probably on my way to obesity. I was not obese by any means, but I was a fat kid. And I was constantly bullied and teased for that. And so then I started just doing everything wrong. So I would do an hour of, I remember I used my mom's Taibo tapes. So it was old school, exercise tapes, boxing, not even, I can't even call that boxing. I don't know what it is, but just cardio. All I did was cardio. I was on the treadmill. I would just watch TV and be on the treadmill constantly. So I just then was skinny fat maybe. And then in high school, I forced myself to play soccer, even though I was 15. No, I was actually 17 when I started. So a 17-year-old playing soccer I was probably the worst on the team. And then I ran track. I tried everything. So I didn't even start lifting weights until soccer. So which is kind of ironic because soccer players aren't known for lifting weights, but that's when I started. And then I joined a gym membership when I was 17 as well. So it kind of just escalated from there.
Nice. And is that what kind of got you to go into the nutrition route, or nutrition and fitness in school?
Yeah, so I started, I actually was really ambitious my first year of college. So I did a double major in exercise science and nutrition, and I carried on throughout it took me a little longer than 4 years, but I carried on throughout with a double major. And then the last year I just dropped it. So I was 3 classes away from I could have finished my nutrition degree and then went on for the dietetics internship, but I just dropped it because I didn't want to do it anymore. Now looking back on it, I regret that. But
yeah, but you got most of it, which I think is the most important thing. So that's awesome, man. And I guess also one of the biggest things what people are kind of watching. I think you and I talk about this. And we're both on TikTok, and we kind of like to sort of kind of debunk a lot of myths that we're seeing, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I wanted to kind of start going over some of the crazy things, because I feel some people are going to have either questions about, they're going to kind of relate to this. So the first thing I wanted to actually talk about is weight, and specifically to weight loss. I know recently you posted about weight fluctuations and what they may happen. I feel a lot of times people get kind of caught up on the whole idea of losing linear weight. This is going to happen specifically. And I think you just did a TikTok on the amount of pounds per week. And so somebody's supposed to lose. What are your thoughts on this? And how do you typically kind of explain this to people when you're working with them?
Yeah. So that actually, the one that I just posted was this lady who was swearing by this miracle drink. And it was essentially just celery juice and green apple juice and just apple cider vinegar or something. So nothing is magic anything. Anybody who's promoting some kind of magic potion or pill or whatever they obviously don't know what they're talking about. A, or maybe B, they just are getting paid for it. But yeah, the fluctuations are not a big deal because your weight can fluctuate 1, 2, 3, even 5, as high as 5 pounds a day. Not every day, but it could happen day to day. So I actually had a guy message me the other day. I think he's like 14 or 15. So I have a lot of teenage guys who are just starting in the gym who follow me or who have recently started following me. And he was like, "Did I ruin everything? I had some extra oats, and I don't want to ruin my calorie deficit." And I was like, "Chill out. There's nothing. Nobody got fat in a day, and nobody lost all their weight in a day. So there's nothing. You're not going to ruin anything in one day."
Okay, yeah, I think that's kind of like the main thing that I feel like it's kind of like happening to like a lot of people, and they kind of get caught on the idea that weight is just like it's just fat, right? And like they get to this like thing that like, if it doesn't happen on like a weekly basis or whatever it is, like they feel like they're actually kind of like not progressing, and like people get so caught up on like the whole idea of like weight loss. When I sometimes like I tell people like, hey, like body composition is important. Sometimes like you're not going to have this like massive change in your weight, but then you may actually experience like changes in your body composition. Like, you're going to look a little bit different. And I think that's kind of like the main area. And I know you talk a lot about this stuff. Now, what's like when it comes down to like weight gain though, because like gaining muscle, it's something that you also kind of talk a lot about like within this. What is like sort of like the realistic expectations when it comes down to building muscle that I feel like a lot of people like completely have, like they have no clue, like really how long does it take? Because I feel like sometimes when somebody starts, obviously they respond really rapidly to like weight, like resistance training and so forth. But a lot of times as you kind of progress, it becomes more difficult. So what is like when you're working with like your people, like your clients, like what is a realistic expectation that you set to men and women when it comes down to building muscle? Because I think obviously it's going to be something completely separate, and like what's the kind of like that conversation? How does it go? Like what do you usually tell them?
Well, for me, weight loss and muscle building, that I still wouldn't suggest or promote either of those happening any faster than 1 to 2 pounds a week. So that TikTok that I made today she was saying like you can lose 2 pounds every day. So that's 60 pounds a month, which is obviously not, first of all, not going to happen. And then if it did, it's completely unhealthy. So even building muscle, I think 2 pounds a week is still like that's pretty high, pretty unrealistic, unless you're a beginner. If you're like intermediate to advanced, that's not going to happen probably. But yeah, and when I coach men and women, I mostly coach men, but I'll take periodically a few females here and there. But when the conversation is actually not so different because men and women we're all still human. So like the rate at which you're going to gain muscle is going to be different, but it's going to be, the conversation is still the same because relative to your, like whether you're a male or a female, males can obviously gain more total muscle mass, but women still have the same capacity to build muscle. It's just not as you're not going to see the visible gains as much as you would in a man.
Now,
So,
did you ever run into like specifically with women, like with the fear of like getting like quote unquote bulky?
yeah. I mean, it happens almost all the time, which is like, luckily for me, I mean, I guess luckily is not like the best word, but it's easier for me because people know that that's what I do. So when a female comes to me and she's like, "Hey, I want to work with you," it's mostly like, well, they say they want to tone up, which means muscle. They want to build muscle. So that's why they come to me. So it's very rare that I get a female who wants to just lose weight and doesn't want to put on any kind of muscle at all. So I'm lucky in that respect. But I have had that conversation, like, no matter what you do, if you lift every single day, if you're lifting like a power lifter as a female and you're eating enough calories, you're still not going to look like a beast. It's very hard. And even if you did want to, you'd need some kind of performance enhancing drug to make that happen.
Yeah. I think like, there are a lot of times I kind of have those, again, unrealistic expectations as to like what's going to happen, and because of social media, typically that kind of gets like, it ruins it for them, and sometimes like they just like think that's exactly what's going to happen the moment that they lift up a dumbbell, and that's obviously like the bigger issue. So specifically with women, and I think that kind of happens all the time.
Well, the thing to remember for everyone actually is that some male bodybuilders don't even look like bodybuilders. So like the physique class, the natural physique guys, they don't even really look like bodybuilders either. They're slim and they're they're lean, but they're not huge. So you kind of have to remember that there are different classes of bodybuilding, and the ones who are natural and doing those classes are not most of the time on anything.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think like one of the things that I always talk about is like, stimulus of training and actually people doing it, because I feel like men and women sometimes just go to the gym, just hit a few reps in machines, so like dumbbells and stuff like that. And obviously it's not smart training, I kind of like talk about this all the time. So do you feel like sometimes when people are complaining like I'm not gaining muscle, it's my genetics and all these different things, what do you think that's related to? Is it the lack of like, well, I'm sure there's a few factors that come into play. Obviously, nutrition has a big kind of like, factor in there. Also, I feel like people don't train as hard as they think as they say they do. Does that ever happen to you? Like, and because it's hard for us coaches to be able to understand, okay, like how do you train really that hard? Or like, is that just basically what you're telling me,
None of them train that hard. They're like, no matter what they say, they're not training hard enough, and they're not tracking their calories properly. There's no other explanation for that. It's not your genetics or your hormones. Seem to be a buzzword these days. That it's the hormones, it's the genetics, it's everything but what you're doing and your program. Because if like I have this conversation all the time, like, who did your program for you? Well, I did. Okay, well, do you have any kind of background in this, or did you look anything up? No, I just I found this program. So, okay, if you found a program on a blog, what makes you think that that's going to work for you? If you haven't, first of all, tested it out, or just like know some simple the foundations of working out. So, I think a lot of the time people are just they don't know what's right for them, and they don't set any goals. So they're it's the equivalent of training like a triathlete, and then having aspirations to be a bodybuilder. You need to have specific workouts to actually what you want to do.
And what do you think it's like? Because I want to break this down to nutrition and like training. Because like we're gonna talk about like, okay, like how to. Because I feel like people would like benefit tremendously for kind of breaking down like the reasoning behind training programming, and just kind of like let's dumb it down for people like that are listening right now into what are some important principles that whenever you're working with somebody you consider, like when you're trying to build a training program, like you focus on like the types of movements and the types of exercises. Do you actually focus on like training frequency? How often do they train? Rep schemes and stuff like that. So like for somebody that is a beginner or somebody that is like still kind of like in the beginning stages, like what does that look like compared to somebody that is like very advanced when it comes on to like exercise?
Well, first of all, before I even do anything, actually, even in my initial questionnaire, I have them set SMART goals already. So they have their goals. They know why they're doing what they're doing, and then we move on. So I don't even do anything until they know that. And then whether it's a beginner or I don't have anybody. I have one guy actually who's pretty advanced in powerlifting, but his nutrition is like zero. So I don't usually work with advanced people, but like a beginner is not going to be that much different because you still have to have the foundations. If I don't know anything about the person, I'm not going to go in saying like, oh, okay, you're advanced, we're going to give you an advanced program. I'm going to test it out first. So the testing is like almost all of it's the most important part, because if you don't have anything scientific to go off of, then how can you expect to have a legitimate program that's going to bring you the results that you're looking for? So yeah, test it. I give them a program, test it out for at least 3 weeks. Even 3 weeks is not that long, but I always say at least 3 weeks, and then we'll make some changes. But consistency is another part of it. So frequency, I can say go to the gym 4 days, but if they're going to go only 2, then there's a problem, because you can have a great program on paper, but if it's not going to be sustainable and not realistic for the person's lifestyle, then there's no point. You might as well not even have a program. So I don't worry about frequency until I can get them consistent, and then we're like, okay, we can add a day. One client actually have a floater day, so I have her on 4 days. I know she's not going to make the 4 days, but if she does, that's cool. She needs to make it 3, so I have the 4th one there just on the off chance that she makes it.
And you talk about SMART goals. I know what they are, but I think a lot of people here don't necessarily or specifically know exactly what that means. So can you kind of like talk and elaborate a little bit more on like, because I do that the same with my clients, what SMART goals are?
Yeah. So like when I'm thinking about the acronym, I can never remember it. So it's specific, measurable,
Specific, measurable,
attainable, I think.
attainable, realistic,
Realistic,
and
time,
time bound or
time
something
focused
like
or
that.
something. Yeah. So it just is really nailing down your goals. So instead of saying like I want to lose weight, you're going to say I want to lose 10 pounds by February 2nd. And I don't know. You just basically it's holding yourself accountable. So it's the more specific and the more detailed it is, the less likely you're going to be like, okay, well tomorrow, or like next week, or I'm too busy. You just have it in your planner, and then you're less likely to let it go.
Yeah. And what do you tell usually people that kind of come to you very motivated? Because it happens to me all the time. And they're like, I'm going to hit the gym 6 days. And like they kind of go all out from zero, like zero completely. And they go at 6 days. What I do is I usually tell them like, can you hold in this motivation for like 6 months? And they're like they start to kind of like doubt process a little bit, so it's like, I don't know if I can be working out for like 6 days in a row, like, or whatever for like 6 months. Is like, exactly. So the motivation that you have right now is because it's something new and it's something exciting and you're like, okay, great. But then the key thing is just to kind of start slow, which is kind of like what you're saying. Like, let's actually try to build up like 3 days a week. That's like the bare minimum we're going to try to do. You mentioned like a floater, maybe I get like an optional day, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if you can't sustain it for this is ideally fitness is a lifelong thing. You're not going to just do it while you're 20 to 25 and then you're just going to be fit for the rest of your life. I know that I wouldn't sustain 6 days a week either. I do sometimes go to the gym 6 days a week, but it's like when I want to. I can personally sustain 4 to 5 days. That's 6 days if I just have the time or whatever. But people go full force. They'll go from sitting on the couch eating Pringles to 6 days a week, or like 7 days a week, no rest. On their rest day, they'll be doing cardio and abs and stuff. It's really not necessary, first of all, and you need your rest days anyway. There's no point in going hard every single day of the week and then leaving no time for recovery, because that's just as important as building and actually doing the work.
Yeah. And then going back to like training, like stimulus and the intensity, because I think we both agree that people don't train as hard as they say they do. Like, what does that mean specifically for you, and how do people can determine that? Like, for example, like if you have obviously like a upper body type of training day, and obviously you're doing curls and doing all these different things. Like, what determines like that how hard like that's supposed to be to create the stimulus to for your body to be able to change, for your muscle to be able to kind of have the right adaptation so it can grow? It's like, oh, I just gonna do 10 reps. Is it based on like weight? And how do you kind of like determine that cue for your clients or for people that you're working with to really establish like, hey, in order for you to get this change to happen, you're gonna have to push hard. Like, what does hard mean for you, and how do you kind of describe it a lot of times for them?
That's kind of arbitrary though, because it really depends on the person. It depends on their goals and their experience and everything. But I'd say generally, I would shoot for like 8 to 12 sets per muscle group per week. So, for example, I might hit shoulders four. I might do like 4 sets one workout, and then 4 sets the next workout. So that could be like in 2 exercises for the shoulders or 3 exercises, whatever. But yeah, I would focus on hitting every muscle group at least twice a week. Muscle groups like small ones like calves and abs can be hit multiple times. But yeah, I would focus on just like splitting it up evenly, because people will go to the gym. Well, guys specifically will go to the gym and they'll do biceps 4 days a week, and they'll just do biceps, and then they'll do like vanity muscles, the only ones that you can see. But you need to hit like every group. Women will go and do cardio every day. That cardio doesn't build muscle, and you're not going to have the body that you're looking for doing cardio every single day. Same with doing glutes 4 times a week. It's the same thing. You just really can't, like, there's no point in just working the muscles that you want to see or that you don't like the look of. You need to split it up. But yeah, back to your question. I really couldn't answer that because everybody's different.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I just feel like sometimes like when people saying like, okay, like they lift very kind of like lighter weights and they're like, oh yes, I did all my sets, and like, it's like, yes, but you were doing this like, for with a 10-pound dumbbell for like a guy that could probably push like, kind of like a higher weight. And I feel like that's a lot of times whenever like, are you training smartly, or you're just training to just kind of like move like some weight, which I'm at the end of the day, it's still movement, it's still kind of like exercise. But for the goals that people are trying to achieve, specifically when I'm working with guys that are trying to kind of build muscle, is like, are you actually training hard enough to be able to kind of elicit that change that you're wanting? So that's kind of like what I typically refer to.
Yeah, and I think as long as you're going hard enough to, I don't know, sometimes I say lift as heavy as possible with good form, because
Yeah.
if your form starts to get sketchy, then you know that you need to lower the weight. Or if you're feeling pain, or if you just can't, like if you're trying to do 10 reps and you can only get 4, then obviously lower the weight. I like to leave like 2, I don't know, maybe a rep or 2 in the tank. I never really go to failure. You can, but for beginners, I wouldn't suggest going to failure at all.
Yeah, I agree. And I know you mentioned the word cardio earlier, because I think a lot of people also have a ton of questions when it comes down to this. I guess like this also applies mostly to like fat loss. However, I think a lot of like guys specifically try to like incorporate a lot of like, well, guys and girls, like, cardio when they're trying to kind of build muscle mass. So what are your thoughts on cardio frequency? I know that a lot of these questions are going to be very, very like, depending on the individual, but like, I feel like in general, we can kind of like establish a consensus as far as like our, the cardio inclusion, when is the right time to do it, and how can you do it? And is it really the right way to like incorporate 6 to 7 days of cardio every day on top of like already training to be able to accomplish people's goals, like whether it's fat loss or muscle gain?
Cardio is honestly counterproductive. If people are trying to trying to build muscle, cardio is counterproductive technically, because if you're trying to eat enough calories to build muscle and then you're taking them away with cardio, there's a way to do that, but most people don't know how to do that. So a lot of the guys that I talk to, they're under eating already, they're doing cardio, and then they're still not gaining muscle. Well, obviously. If you're trying to lose fat, that's a different story. I don't prescribe any cardio until I see what's going on. So when I give the client their new program, I don't have them doing any cardio at all. I'll have them doing a step goal. So I'll see like their average steps, and then I'll say, okay, your average steps were 3,000. You're gonna hit 5,000 for 2 weeks, and then we'll see what happens. And then I just bring them up from there. Then if we really want to add cardio, we can add 10, 15 minutes there. So I like to give the minimum effective dose. So the bare minimum in order to elicit a response. There's no reason to do 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, because during my competition prep, I was doing like 30 minutes to 45 minutes every single day, but that's different because it's very short term and I know that there's an end date. And it was still overkill. At the end, I was doing an hour a day. It was ridiculous. So for the general population, that's not something that's necessary, and it's not sustainable for sure.
Yeah, and I think like people try to like incorporate that as part of exercise, when in reality they're spending most of their day sitting down in an office or whatever, and like it's more about like increasing like movement. And I think the step goal that you're talking about is like kind of like a great way to describe it. Like I just simply like tell him, like explain what NEAT is, like non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and explain that that's something that's exercise is not the only way to like burn calories. Like, there's a ton of other ways that are actually far more effective. I was just like, on vacation in Arizona, and we went on hikes, dude. I was like pushing like 25,000 steps every single day. I was not exercising, but granted, obviously I came back at the same weight that I left at, so I think a lot of times like people underestimate the power of what you do on a daily basis. And they just kind of like, just try to focus on that hour of exercise that they're getting on a daily basis, thinking that that's all what's effective to be able to kind of like accomplish like fat loss goals or whatever may be the case. Specifically for that.
It's really easy to incorporate more activity. If this were just a phone call, I would be pacing. I have my AirPods and I just walk around. So where I would have been sitting, I don't know, maybe at my computer or something, if I'm making an Instagram post or something, I'll take my phone and I'll go walk and make the post. Like you can really create other opportunities to get active. It's just a matter of, do you want to get up from your desk or not.
Yeah, and I think that's like the bigger. It's just like people don't move as much as they want, as they should, and I think that's obviously something that sometimes that kind of keeps them from accomplishing some of those goals that I feel like are specifically now with this whole pandemic thing. I feel like people became more inactive than ever. Some of them didn't, but and I feel like that's obviously how things kind of started to happen. I have clients in New York, for example, like they were walking to work every single day, like getting like 10 to 20,000 steps, and now they're barely like doing anything at all. So they're starting to wonder like, okay, what kind of adjustments do I need to be making? So it's just simply like a matter of like moving a ton more, and I think that's obviously kind of like the main area. I also wanted to kind of like talk about like the biggest kind of like fats, like or like the craziest things that you hear specifically from comments on TikTok, comments every time. I know like you kind of like bash a ton of like fad diets, which I obviously agree with you on all this. Like, what are some of the craziest things you've been hearing lately when it comes down to nutrition or even like fitness?
Well, luckily, I don't hear many crazy things like I do every once in a while, but it's mostly like keto, intermittent fasting, like the buzzwords that are being made popular these days. But I think the craziest stuff that I've heard was the jaw products, like the rubber that you chew on to get rid of face fat, that obviously don't work. And then there was one TikTok dance. I don't know if to me it's a dance. They were passing it off as an exercise, but they were just literally like moving like this. So like they're just for the people
like the Japanese ab exercise.
Yeah, so it was like they were just like moving their torso back and forth. Like that's not an ab exercise. So they were saying do this for a week and you'll see results. No, you won't see anything because you're burning 5 calories. And then also there was another one that was similar to that. It was the Japanese ab exercise or something. I don't know if you saw that fad, but it was like you roll up a towel or something, you put it behind your back, and then I actually didn't watch the whole thing, but it was pretty stupid. And they said after 10 days, you'll see results. But
yeah,
any like 10 days or like 30-day guarantee, obviously, it's a scam.
And when it comes down to like, and I know you, so one of your TikToks, like, you talked a lot about like fats, like things like intermittent fasting, like keto, like paleo, all those different things in the past. Why do you think people hang on to them so much? And what do you think people kind of like, hey, like this is like working for me?
Like there's so many, it's so complicated because there's so many other factors involved. Like for example, keto, people love keto because they can lose fat fast, in quotations, because they're losing water weight really fast. It's not sustainable because nobody was trying to eat butter and bacon for the rest of their lives. And also because it's not meant for as a weight loss diet. It's literally for specific populations like epilepsy and like other small niche conditions. It's not for you. It's not for like the overweight middle-aged person to just lose 50 pounds a month. That's not how it works. Intermittent fasting, I think it's sold as like a
diet, which is
it's a diet, but it's sold as like a mind and body kind of thing. So like you're going to get all these crazy magical spiritual benefits when in reality you're just skipping breakfast and your first snack and going straight into lunch, and then that's
creating
all.
A calorie deficit.
Yeah, you're creating a calorie deficit like with every other diet. So there's really nothing magical about any diet. And I saw someone saying like, I don't know whether, or I'm on keto right now, and I don't know whether to switch over to paleo or Whole30. And I was like, well, anything with a diet or any diet with a name is not something that you should be doing. It's something that was invented by someone to sell a book.
Yeah, like the start, like there's a podcast we did recently with like the Dell diet, which it was called like Surf Food Diet. Which it was like literally made by like 2 guys in the UK. But they basically said that there was like this like proteins. The base of it makes sense, but then they created the diet just as a way to kind of sell something. So there's like this family of proteins called sirtuins that are kind of like related to like muscle metabolism. And literally, like they said, they basically call it the skinny gene. And like they said that if you eat specific foods, that you activate those like proteins. And they basically took some research and they kind of extrapolated into whatever they wanted to make it sound like, and then they created a diet.
You mean they cherry picked and misrepresented?
Well, yeah, and at the same time they did a quote unquote study, and then they put people on a 1,000 calorie diet. and like on a couple juices, and of course they're like, oh, this is effective, people lost all this weight, and I was like, wait, so 1,000 calories, like does that, like, you're trying to put two and two together right now, and the fact that you're just like you're creating a calorie deficit, which it's also something that I feel like I'm kind of like happy that now people are starting to kind of catch up on the fact that calorie deficit is what a lot of these diets kind of create. And I know, like, I've been getting a lot of questions, I'm sure you as well. Like, I think like people sometimes even think like calorie deficit is a diet. No, like calorie deficit is like the process of lowering calories to a level that is like below the amount that you're burning on a daily basis. Now, the typical questions that most people ask is, how do you get on a calorie deficit? And I know, again, this is a question that everybody's completely different about, but I know you did a post kind of like recently on some simple ways that people can kind of like start like getting into this and understanding what a calorie deficit is. So how can people get on that stage? Like they say, for example, right now, somebody's like, okay, I'm struggling. In fact, I think we have a question in here. Well, I actually put it in a minute, but what would be like the few things that you would tell somebody, like if you're just having like a quick chat with somebody about this, like, hey, I want to know how do I get in a calorie deficit?
So this is something that's so easy to me, and I don't get why people complicate this, but it's literally just taking one thing out. So and I explain this every day, and it's still like people don't get it. It's like today, for example, I didn't have the bagel, so I admittedly had 6 cookies last night, and so this morning I didn't have my morning bagel. So I've been trying to have just like I'm not restricting anything. I just didn't want it because I wasn't hungry. So I didn't have those 300 calories. So already I'm 300 calories down, and I had my normal eggs. And then where I would have had rice, I had a chicken salad. So I'm just removing calories. So I personally did that today. I'm not saying you should just start removing random foods, but if you keep everything the same, so say like you have that bagel and eggs every day for breakfast, and then the rest of the day you just keep that the same every single day this week, and you remove the bagel from breakfast, you're already in a calorie deficit. Assuming that your activity is the same and that your food is the same, you haven't changed anything drastically, you're in a calorie deficit. That's all. And I could end it there, but just other ways that you could do that. Stop snacking. You don't need to snack because you're not a toddler. You can just keep going with your day, or just replace those high calorie snacks with an apple or something, with something low, a little lower. It doesn't have to be crazy lower. It doesn't have to be like cucumbers. It could be rice cakes instead of, I don't know, what's a banana
bar or like something.
Yeah. So like something that's slightly less calories, or you could increase your activity and keep everything else the same. So eat the exact same and increase your activity, or you could do both. So there's infinite possibilities, but it's pretty easy.
Well, it's like you said, dude, like it's not rocket science, and it comes easy. But then I think a lot of times like people are looking for something more, you usually kind of call it something more sexy, something that sounds better. It sounds like more fancy, and they kind of get lost in that idea. And like, because it just doesn't really sound like that's going to do anything.
Right.
Like, oh, you just like telling me that I need to stop eating this. And of course, it's a lot more complicated than that, because people don't eat the same thing every day and stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to making sure that, like, it's like the example of like soda, for example. There's people that drink soda, like 3 sodas a day. Dude, you cut down 2, like on a daily basis, you keep 1, you're already kind of consuming like 200 to 300 calories less on a daily basis that you were used to actually be consuming. So like, it's just something as simple as that, or like the replacements that you're talking about. But I feel like people are just kind of wanting, and I think why rapid weight loss occurs is because they do all these like massive changes overnight. And of course that the deficit, like, or the amount of deficit they create is like massive. And then they're like, okay, like this is why this is helpful, and this is why I kind of like worked, but then they just couldn't sustain it. Martinez in there says like, sustainability, which is actually the bigger thing. Somebody asked a question there, should I switch to a vegan diet? What's your response to that?
That was Yinka, my friend Yinka. I'm not sure if he's serious or not, but no, you should not switch to a vegan diet. You can if you really want to. If it's like for ethical reasons, whatever, I can't really tell you not to do that, but you don't need to switch to any
for weight loss specifically. Yeah,
and it's not going to help you with weight loss. I mean, honestly, a lot of vegans are I'm going to say it, malnourished, and they don't do it right. There is a way to do it right, and you can be perfectly fine. Most of them do not do that. So
because they don't have the education for it. Like, this is like,
or the patience, or like I can even tell a vegan. So I had a conversation with a vegan a couple weeks ago, and this person was like, no, I eat enough protein. I eat beans and lentils and peanut butter. Okay, well, those are the staples of a vegan diet, but those are not protein sources. They have protein. Lentils are, I guess, high in protein, but they're also high in carbs. So I've never really had an experience with an overweight vegan though, so I can't really say like they're getting too much of any one macronutrient. But for me, it's worth it.
I
Like,
think people do it for sometimes like the wrong reasons. Like they're thinking like this is going to be kind of like the better approach for weight loss, when in reality it's not always kind of like the case. But like you said, like if it's done for personal reasons, like somebody doesn't really like to eat meat, or somebody just kind of like, again, you said it, like doing it for ethical reasons, religious reasons, like that's a different story. But I feel like they still even need to educate themselves on how to do it properly, so they don't have deficiencies that I tend to see very often.
yeah, well, it's the correlation is not causation kind of thing, because everybody was always like, oh, I've never felt better. I feel so much better now that I switched to vegan. Well, of course, because you've incorporated more water, more vegetables. You're eating less junk because it's not vegan, and then it's not the meat. The meat was not causing you to feel bad. It was the other stuff that you were doing. You're probably getting more sleep as a result of being more active and eating better. So, I mean, it's not the diet itself, it's what you're doing in your life.
Yeah, did you watch that documentary, Game Changers?
I can't bring myself to do
it. Well, I did. I kind of like lived through it enough, and the biggest thing is like they talk about athletes kind of going vegan and like feeling and like having all these amazing things happening to them. But then, like me being a sports dietitian who worked with NFL athletes in the past, I know how they eat. Like they're not eating like whole grains and like, meat and like, lean meats. No, they're eating like KFC, they're eating McDonald's, they're eating like Chick-fil-A every single day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So like when people kind of like make all these claims as far as like, okay, this diet is like kind of the same, like kind of like narrative with paleo, it's like you're eliminating so much crap out of your diet because you kind of get into this idea that this is obviously the way that you need to eat. And props to you, because sure, you need to be eating more whole foods, you need to be eating a lot more vegetables, that is for sure. But it's the elimination of all this like, ultra processed, higher calorie items that are still kind of like being additive into your diet that we're causing the issues, not necessarily like, it's not like the elixir of like health, the fact that you're just not adding more vegetables, and that's obviously what's kind of causing this, So
yeah,
like,
and n=1 is not useful data. Like there, I think there was a weightlifter, like the Olympic weightlifter in the documentary. Yep. I know things because I haven't seen the actual documentary, but I've heard about it. So there was the Olympic weightlifter who's now, one case does not mean that it's worth anything. So
yeah,
for him that he's able to do that, but that's for the majority of the population, that's not the case.
Well, and then we don't even know what he eats. I mean, he could probably be pushing a ton amount of calories on a daily basis and getting enough protein from other sources and like supplement, whatever may be the case. And I think that's a part of it that we don't necessarily see. Like
perhaps it's his performance enhancing drugs that are able to, are helping him with his
exactly.
Not the vegan diet.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that they don't really talk about, and I think like that's a big difference when it comes down to that. So again, I don't think it's like people, if they want to do it for the right reasons. I have helped some people do it in the past, and I refer it out to people that are, or dietitians or nutrition coaches that are like specialized in kind of like vegan type of diets. But I just don't think people do it for the right reasons most of the time. So I think, I kind of like both agree with that. We do have a couple questions in here. I'm just going to put them on the next screen real quick. So somebody asked, if you have a substantial amount to lose, should you focus on gaining muscle while losing weight, or lose weight then focus on, I guess, and like, or lose weight then focus on gaining muscle? That's a good question.
That's a very common question that I get, and I always suggest building first. So there's no reason to cut down. People are always like, okay, well, I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to focus on losing the fat, and then I'm going to start building muscle. Why would you do that when there's nothing to show underneath? So it's like, I don't know. I can't even think of an example, but it's like you haven't built anything. There's nothing to show. So you're just going to have like a skinny fat frame, because that's how skinny fat happens, because you don't have muscle to show underneath.
And how do you mentally deal with the fact that you may gain some fat in the process? Because I think that for me, dude, like, and I'm speaking here super vulnerably, like that to me was always kind of the hardest part when I was like trying to kind of build muscle, like, you know, understanding, and I know you posted about this, like, you know, you have to be okay with the fact that you're not going to have a six pack or looking your best, you know, when you're in that process. But I feel like mentally it's kind of like, it's difficult. So like, how do you kind of like deal with that? I feel like that sometimes it's hard.
Well, I personally just deal with it in, I think about what I even have to prep for. Like during this entire pandemic, I don't care. I'm eating, I told you I'm eating cookies. I'm doing whatever I want. I'm not going crazy every day, but if I want something, I'm going to have it. So I went through a period where I was competing and then I would mess up and then I would go through disordered eating. And then I would like, it was a vicious cycle. So I was like, okay, I need to have abs because I want to do this photo shoot or I want to do whatever. But it was just like, there was no rhyme or reason. Like I was like, okay, well, I'm going to pick this photo shoot and I'm going to do it. And then, you know, like I didn't have any goals. So that's the first thing. Like, what are your goals? Set the goals, set a time frame. So if you have 4 months until your photo shoot or until your wedding or whatever you want to do, that's it. So get in shape, lose, like cut down, do whatever you need to do, and then be okay with gaining a bit more weight. You don't have to go crazy and gain 50 pounds, but your weight's going to fluctuate a bit. It's fine. But yeah, for me, I just don't care anymore.
And yeah, I just think, and I think like people get scared because of the fact that they like, well, like I've already kind of struggled with weight loss as it is. So like, why would I want to kind of like do that? And I feel like they struggle with the weight loss because they just don't always kind of like do it in the right, proper way. So like they get scared shitless of like the fact that, okay, now I'm going to have to like gain some, like I'm going to see the number on the scale go up. And like now what I do when actually it's like, you know, 5 pounds heavier or whatever, but you know, for deep inside that you're actually looking better, like you have more muscle in you and whatnot. But I think a lot of times it kind of messes with people's head because they just don't feel like they have the formula to be able to kind of bring it back down.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of a double-edged sword because when you think the opposite, so when you have the abs, a lot of the time it's not worth it, and you know that when you get there because you're feeling like, I don't know, you like there's a birthday party or something and you tell yourself you can't have something because you're going to gain weight, and then like later on during the weekend you're going to binge, and then
to cycle
back on like the next week you're restricting, and then you know, like it's just like a vicious cycle. So you need to get in a place where you're like, okay, 5-10 pounds, who cares? I'm gonna lose 5-10 pounds, who cares? You know, like, so you're in that who cares kind of like plus or minus 10 pounds. I think that's like the best area to be in, which we would call maintenance. So I like to be at maintenance. I'm 165-ish right now. So my stage weight is about 148. So I'm not that far away from my stage weight. Stage weight is also not sustainable. So I would never be around that year round anyway. So I'm not that far. If 10 pounds off and I would be fine.
Yeah, that's I think that's important. I do have another question here. I don't know if you actually know what that means. It just says, what workouts do you split? I'm not
so
sure
what split do I? So what's my preferred split?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I personally do push pull legs, which is push pull leg and legs, separating it into a push day, a pull day, and a leg day. But I focus on like my lagging body parts. So the hamstrings, rear delts, just shoulders in general. So I really focus on those multiple times a day. Multiple times a week. And then
Okay. Yeah, I think push pull. So push pull legs. That's kind of like, so you split it up into 3.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll do it twice a week. Sorry, I was getting distracted by the by the lights.
No worries.
Yeah, so I do 2 of those per week.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. So I want to be respectful of your time. I usually like to kind of finish up, like, since we're obviously kind of recording a podcast here too. I always got kind of like to ask some like sort of like a rapid fire questions that would kind of like close it up. And of course, guys, if you're still watching this, I know there's some of you guys that are still live. Like, make sure that if you have any questions, like drop them down. We want to make sure that we're able to kind of like answer those as well. But the first question I always like to ask is, what is the main like exercise or like the exercise that you love to do, like a movement specific? It could be deadlifts, like squats or cardio, whatever may be the case. Like, what is the one thing that you love to do?
Bench, even though I'm not very good at it. but then
I'm terrible at it because I got long arms, so I'm terrible. Like it's awful. It's awful for me. That's why not my favorite movement. Um, Second question would be, what would be a book that you would like recommend everybody to have on their bookshelves? It could be nutrition, it could be business, it could be anything. Like something that you would always like literally it's Christmas and you're gonna gift it to somebody.
my go-to is always anything by Jen Sincero, but specifically "You Are a
You're a
Badass."
badass. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a great book. Definitely. We're gonna make sure if you guys listen to end the podcast, like I'm gonna make sure to link it up in the show notes.
my favorite.
Third, what is like a podcast or a nutrition educational source online that you recommend people to kind of go to that you're like, okay, this is a good person to listen to, and you can totally shameless plug your your podcast or your stuff on there as well.
That's the thing. I don't really listen to that many anymore, just because I don't have a lot of time to to do that. But I listen to mostly like productivity and like business stuff. Anyway, it's not applicable. But my podcast is called The Fittest Guy in the Office, available on all platforms. But I talk about like everything. So nutrition, working out, business, productivity, really whatever you want.
Awesome. The last question, and we'll close it up, would be if you were stranded on a desert island for the rest of your life and you had to pick one food and one food only to live off of for the rest of the existence, what would you choose?
Green chili chicken enchiladas, specifically from New Mexico.
Dude, that's awesome. Like that's definitely one of the best ones. I usually kind of get some crazy options, but that's definitely a good one.
Very specific.
Very specific. Smart goals, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Dude, how can people get in touch with you? How can people find you, work with you? How can they connect with you?
I am the Fit Adam on all platforms, most active on Instagram and TikTok. I will be on YouTube pretty soon, probably next week, not next week, next month. And then my podcast again is called The Fittest Guy in the Office, available on all streaming platforms. You can work with me by sending me an Instagram DM or clicking the link in my bio.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. And definitely check out the Fit Adam. He's super huge on TikTok, and I know like he's getting a lot of content out there too, but obviously on Instagram. So yeah, guys, give him a follow and check him out. Definitely he would be a person that I would totally like hands down recommend for training, nutrition, a lot of like things, what it comes down to like achieving your goals. So but I know you work specifically with a specific kind of like crowd as a population, right?
Yeah, I primarily work with men, but I do take a few women here and there, but it's mostly fat loss and muscle gain. No like fad diets or losing 10 pounds yesterday kind of thing.
Okay, good. Good to know for people listening. Awesome, dude. Well, I just want to thank you again for your time, dude. And again, thank you again for coming on to our live and also Viva Nutrition Radio. So
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Yeah, dude. Thank you so much again. And we'll close it up.